I met Amanda Lukof and her fascinating startup, Eleplan, that is using AI to help families manage challenging daily routines of caregivers. Joining Amanda on the stage are Duncan Niederauer, co-founder and vice chairman, Transcend Capital Partners, and Autism Speaks CEO, Kieth Wargo. Both are highly accomplished ex-financiers, come important and effective autism philanthropists in New Jersey. And here to introduce the panel is a man who goes to so many events that he needs a new pair of shoes every week. But seriously, he is one of the great connectors of innovation in New Jersey, my new friend, James Barrood.
Thanks, Drew. All right, come on up, folks. You know, in the spirit of our lousy football teams, I'm going to call an audible, and I'm going to ask Rajesh Anandan to come join the panel as well. Rajesh has an amazing background dealing with investing in innovation, and formerly from the venture arm from UNICEF. Clearly, he knows something about nonprofit. So we're going to talk about a few topics here today. But my job is to get your engagement and to move this conversation along, because there's a lot of insights to be shared. So we're gonna keep these introductions really brief, although each person here has an amazing background, and I'm really delighted to be just facilitating. Really, my job is to really glean as many insights as possible. So let's just start at the end with Duncan. Duncan, just give a quick background. You have an amazing background, how you got to where you are in this area of neurodiversity. And in the spirit of pizza, which we started with today, tell us your favorite pizza that you like to eat. Okay, it could be pineapple and ham or bacon, it's fine. Go ahead.
I've gotten a lot of questions in my life about a lot of complicated topics. That's the easiest question I've ever gotten. Pepperoni with extra cheese, for sure. Okay. I mean, if you're going to bother to eat a pizza, go big or go home, right? So I'm up here with a couple of different hats on. I was privileged to have a long career in financial services, and like a lot of families who are impacted by autism and neurodiversity, our family was no exception to that. One of my daughters is sitting to my right. The other one is secretly interviewing for a new job today, so I hope this isn't being recorded or she's in trouble with her current employer. And our middle child, Liam, is on the autistic spectrum, and actually is at RCAS and has been there since the beginning. So our family spends almost all of our philanthropic energy on special needs and the veterans community. And I think listening to even just what Christopher was talking about, some of the challenges we're talking about today around neurodiverse people finding their way into the traditional workplace has a lot of commonality with what veterans struggle with. And boy, Christopher nailed it. Like, the interview process doesn't work for them either, because we don't know how to interview them, not because they don't know how to be interviewed. We don't know a traditional HR person. No disrespect if anyone in the room has that job. I'd count myself as a business leader in that same boat. It's easy to interview a traditional candidate. You know what questions to ask, you know how to engage. A neurodiverse person and a veteran have completely different backgrounds, and they're going to answer the questions differently, their perspective is different, their experience is different. And that's on us to help them figure it out. It's not on them. And we've traditionally put the onus on the interviewee, not the interviewer. So part of why I was excited to join today when Amanda asked me to was not just because you can't say no to your kids, but because I think this is a really important topic that we're talking about, and any ways we can figure out to change the formula so that the companies win by hiring these young people, and the young people win by finding, gainful employment. I'll spend all the time in the world on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Amanda?
There we go. I think it's working now. Hi, I'm Amanda Lukof. I am the CEO and co-founder of Eleplan. As Drew mentioned, Eleplan is a digital care planning platform. We use AI to make life easier for caregivers, both on the family side and the professional care providers. All of that was motivated by my brother Liam. He has been my North Star for as long as I can remember. I went to law school for special education law many moons ago. I consider myself a recovering attorney, and I think I'm almost through all the steps now of recovery. And I honestly thought before founding Eleplan that I would live on the bridge in this room with all of you. I am a collaboration junkie. I think that there are too many silos between nonprofit and for-profit. And I have had the privilege, because of our family, to meet so many people on both sides of that conversation and just sort of quietly observe the redundancies and the recreation of the wheels and all of the things. And I think I'll always be part of that conversation, but ultimately was driven to create Eleplan because the solution didn't exist for our family. And I'm really proud to be a part of the innovation community and really thankful to be here. And just a huge shout out to Drew. I know this whole day was a labor of love for you, and I'm really glad that you brought me into the process. So thank you.
Pizza.
So, it's a little strange, but white pizza with pesto and sausage.
God,
Yeah.
that sounds good. Okay. Kieth, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kieth Wargo. I'll start with the pizza question. The answer is plain. Plain with nothing on it. And the reason is that my son, who's 26 years old and is autistic, pizza is one of the things he likes, but it cannot have anything on it. It can't have oregano. It can't have pepperoni. It can't have anything on it except dough, tomato, and mozzarella cheese. No white pizza, no margarita pizza, just plain. So that's like Duncan, and Duncan and I actually share a background of the same, coming from alumni of the same financial services firm. I kind of wear many hats. I grew up in investment banking. It remains one of my passions around private capital and investing. I am the owner of a co-owner of a small business, which is about 5 miles from here, where one of our missions is to hire and retain neurodiverse employees. About 25-30% of our employees are on the spectrum. And as of almost approximately exactly 3 years ago, became the CEO of Autism Speaks, and I'll probably address that as we go through. But we have I've had quite a investment and commitment to trying to increase employment in the autism community for over a decade now, and remains one of the key tenets to our mission.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Rajesh, thank you for joining us from all the way from Florida.
Recently, though, I used to live in the city, and then my wife and I decided we're done with the winters. We're going to go somewhere with warm oceans. Tampa.
And hurricanes.
3 summers in a row we've had to evacuate. Oceans are getting warmer, though, so it's great for the beach time. So does everybody get a sloth? Because it's very distracting. No, the sloths. It's the stuffies.
Oh, I don't know. Can we share these plushies? No.
I have to
You have to earn it.
Well, all right. So I'm Rajesh Anand, one of the founders at Ultranauts. We started the company about 11 years ago with a mission to demonstrate that neurodiversity could be an advantage in a business setting. And our theory of change was simple. Step 1, build a business with a truly neurodiverse team. We built a technical business in data governance and quality systems and AI readiness. And the team at this point, we have teammates across 30 states, a couple Canadian provinces. 3/4 of the team is neurodivergent. Majority of teammates are autistic. Ton of teammates are ADHDers, dyslexic, dyspraxic. Half the leadership team is autistic. Our chief data scientist is autistic. Our head of data governance consulting is an ADHDer, and so on. But we don't think about neurotypes as a way to sort of keep count for obvious reasons, and maybe we'll get into that. We have probably 10-15% of the team is non-speaking, sometimes as a solution architect leading the kind of consulting teams. I guess half the company has auditory challenges. We probably over-index on a range of mental health conditions, generalized anxiety disorder, complex PTSD, workplace PTSD, depression, et cetera. And so it's a very different kind of organization that we built, and we work with, the CIO at Goldman Sachs will bring us in because they got to stop PII leakage, or the CDO at Pepsi will bring us in because they got to get to the root of why they can't trust their demand forecasting model. And so it's high pressure, hard problems. People think it's neat we have a neurodiverse team, but that's not why they bring us in. Part 2 of the mission has been to take everything we've learned from part 1 and figure out how we can share that with others in any way possible. We published some of our tools as free open source tools. Others we're trying to figure out how to commercialize. We've taken in impact investing. We've partnered with nonprofits and philanthropy. And then in a prior life, I started at Bain and Microsoft, but went into nonprofits, then the UN, started a couple innovation funds that were funding for-profit, nonprofit, and have been on both sides of kind of the impact investing table.
Okay, pizza.
Oh, pepperoni.
Pepperoni. Okay.
I hadn't had a slice of pizza until I was 17 years old, because I grew up in Sri Lanka. I ended up in the US, in New Hampshire. It's very cold.
Got it. Well, speaking of New Hampshire and New England, I'm a Jersey guy, Central Jersey, and I'd always heard about white pizza, clam pizza. So my daughter and I were on the way back from Boston this weekend, and for the first time in my life, I had white clam pizza, and it was amazing. But this place also had pizza, like different varieties. So the other half of the pizza was mashed potatoes and brisket. And it was quite good too. It doesn't sound good, but it was great. So I'm Jim Barrood. I'm very involved in the tech and entrepreneurship startup ecosystem for the past 25 years. And of course, talent is so important to the strength of our ecosystem. And so when we think about talent, we think about leveraging all people in all ways. And clearly, I have folks who are neurodiverse in my family as well. So that's me, my background. So I'm going to ask 2 questions of this panel, and then I'm going to open it up to you folks. So please have your questions ready. These folks are going to answer these questions relatively briefly. I want your questions to be brief, and then their responses to be brief, so we can get as many insights as possible. So the first one is the growth in social impact investing. All of you know this in your own lives, in your own businesses. How has that changed over the past decade? I'll start with you, Duncan.
I personally think that we throw out a lot of these words and we don't stop to ask ourselves what it actually means, right? And I think mission-driven investing and philanthropic donating are converging. I think you see more and more philanthropy dollars, and I can tell you how I think most people think about it now. If you're thinking about if you're thinking about, I have $1, where am I going to put it? Well, you always want to put it in a place where it's going to have the most impact. And I think continuing to separate, okay, I'm going to put it in a small startup company because I hope to make money, or I'm going to put it into a nonprofit because I hope it's going to help them scale. I don't know that those things are that different anymore, at least not how we think about it. I personally think you will see more and more philanthropists, and you already see it, asking for deliverables rather than just putting something into, what feels like an abyss sometimes, right? Even if you think about those of us who donate to our alma maters, like I haven't donated to the annual fund of my university in 3 decades, and I never will. Now, we've put a scholarship in my mother's name and memory for financial aid because we specifically know where it's going. We know how much money is there. We see how the portfolio changes. we have 1 or 2 kids every year that we make it easy for them to go to Colgate, and like that's much more satisfying. Selfishly, it's just you know you're making a difference in someone's life, and I think you're starting to see the same thing in this intersection of philanthropy and social impact investing or mission-driven investing. Philanthropy is mission-driven by definition, right? So I think it's all kind of the same, and I think we should start thinking about like blurring this gap between the nonprofit world and the for-profit world, particularly in the neurodiverse universe.
Great. Go ahead, Amanda.
I'll echo my dad's sentiments because I was raised by his ideas and influenced by them in large part. But when I think of the term social impact investing, I don't think of just for-profit investment. I think of nonprofit and for-profit together. And in my own family, I have 2 boys, and my husband and I nerded out, like even when we were first engaged, we talked about if there was a world where we had enough wealth where we can contribute meaningfully in a nonprofit space, how are we going to decide? And we had seen our families contribute to organizations like Autism Speaks, but I think it's a generational thing. In our age bracket, we wanted metrics. Like we partnered with nonprofits that literally have rubrics for how they decide how to give money. I'm looking at Kate Russell. We met through Philly, and one of the nonprofits there is the Eagles Autism Foundation. They have a rigorous rubric for how they deploy nonprofit dollars. And I think when I think of social impact investing, it's not just investing in companies like Eleplan, which I think will change and make a social impact. It's also the nonprofits and how we responsibly deploy that capital.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different bend on this question. So the first time I ever heard of private investment going into the neurodivergent space or autism was while I was sitting at a conference at Texas Pacific Group was holding their annual conference in Phoenix, Arizona, 2017. And they put up an investment thesis on wanting to invest in the autism space and wanting to invest in autism therapies. And the supply and demand imbalances and everything that everybody in this room knows about. And I was shocked to hear a large investment firm focused on something where there had been, to my knowledge, virtually no private investment. Fast forward today, and I put a list together when I was thinking about this, I can think of 7 different private equity funds, venture capital funds that are out there. Organizations like Multiple who are acting as accelerators, K Ventures, Difference Partners, the Autism Impact Fund, et cetera. All institutions who are looking at the space saying we believe there is private capital opportunities here and putting their money where their mouth is. Now, Chris McElveny, who is the founder of K Capital, about a week ago put up, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I don't really think so, there was a $150 million venture capital fund that's been raised for pets. And his comment was, I guess I got into the wrong space. There's $150 million raised for pets. These organizations are still all quite small in comparison to the vast amount of capital that's out there in the broad venture capital community. The investment opportunities, I think, are more on the come. I made the call in 2021 when I was speaking at a conference in San Francisco that I thought that it was a year or so before we would see our first public company that was focused on neurodiversity and the disability space. I was wrong. We're not there yet, and I don't think, and no company I know is necessarily on the horizon. But where we sit at Autism Speaks is we have companies coming to us reasonably often looking for help. They're usually looking for data or research that we've done that they can use to help build buttress their thesis, which we're happy and proud to do. We're not investors. We don't have capital to do that, but we try to serve a role there. In a couple of cases, we've gotten involved in clinical work. Our research scientists will get involved in helping validate models, et cetera. But the pace of capital development as well as the pace of entrepreneurship, like what Amanda's doing, is happening. It's still early days, but it's happening. I think it's very, very encouraging. We've heard a lot today about, the infrastructures of public markets, or the public institutions that are the foundation of supporting a lot of the work that that you all do and a lot of the work that happens out there. But I believe that private capital is an accelerant that of which there is no better accelerant.
Okay, thank you. No, Rajesh.
Bean, take a seat. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Hi, Bean. My brother's here if you want to say hi, everyone.
Hey!
Sorry to interrupt.
So the first time I was kind of exposed to impact investing was around innovative financing for vaccine development in R&D, and this was in the kind of early noughts, and the term impact investing didn't quite exist. I think there's a role for, either you're trying to get your money back and make some money, or you're not. And I think these terms can sometimes get a little confusing because, for example, you can have philanthropic, results-based, or performance-based funding, and that's been around for about 25 years, at least formally called, given that label. But when it comes to investing where you want to make money or get money back, I think there's still some unresolved issues, mainly SROI, or like social return on investment, still hasn't been well defined. There's huge, there's a lot of effort around it, a lot of investment going, or philanthropy going into it. But at the end of the day, the rubber hits the road when, so for example, at Ultranauts, we're for profit. We took impact investing, very patient capital. I'd argue it's more like philanthropy because no one's pushing us to do things we don't want to do. For example, we had our #1 enterprise customer at the time was about, we had too much revenue concentration. A third of our revenue was in this one enterprise account. It was really bad for our team. And we're a professional services firm. We go in, we solve a problem, but we're interacting with these clients. I mean, it was interrupt driven. Like the interactions were just really not good, and we knew that, and so we intentionally walked away from a third of our revenue. Now, if we didn't have a board that was mission aligned, that's disastrous. Or we're being measured on things that are easy to count, like, how many people did you hire? Okay, great. We hired 40 people one year, and that was more than anyone else, but nobody's actually pushing on what kind of environment did you hire those people into? Because that should actually count more. And so we ended up commissioning an external third-party audit of psych safety in the company, just like we would do a financial audit that investors demand, and shared it directly with the board and our employees. And all this to say, measuring impact isn't as easy as it sounds, because it comes with some real inherent trade-offs. And the real challenge is most investors, even if they're investing in kind of autism employment, actually don't understand what the problems to be solved are, actually don't understand why it's really hard to scale or sustain these programs. And there's a focus on hiring, which is good. You got to start somewhere. But actually, the harder problems to solve are things like, do you know if you have a psychologically safe environment that you're bringing people into? Do you know if you're going to evaluate people's performance in a fair, transparent, objective way? Do you know if you're setting people up to have career progressions, even if their profiles are spiky and kind of unusual? And those are much more important things, and not easy things to solve or count. And this is where the notion of impact investment starts to get, interesting.
Got it. Okay, so this is the second question, and then we'll get questions from the audience. The second question is about for-profit and nonprofit collaboration. We have a wide range of companies and organizations in our audience, some for-profit, some nonprofit. But how can we best collaborate to sort of amplify the impact, the results of what nonprofits do?
I will start. I think I touched on it a little bit before, but I think, and to echo Kieth's comment earlier, I think there's a lot to be said for the data sharing. I think what I saw a lot of redundancy in before I jumped into the entrepreneurial world was, you have data here, you need the data there. You're trying to conduct a study for your for-profit business, but this nonprofit already did the work, so why are you going to spend money that you don't have to do the work that they already did? It's just very nonsensical. And so I think because I didn't know that I was going to be an entrepreneur, I had this very like Switzerland perspective on all of this, which gave me a lot of very objective insight. And I've learned now in my role at Eleplan, one example is, as I leverage the whole list that Kieth ran off for all VCs that I'm pitching to currently. So if you want to give them a call and let them know they should invest in Eleplan, that'd be great. But we actually leverage partnerships with nonprofits like Rutgers. So, we can speak to the data points that I'm learning through Christopher Menente and Liam's participation in that program, using that as milestones that drive investor attraction to our fund. And so I think that there is a history in nonprofits that these early stage VCs don't have. And the VCs need what the nonprofits have, but the nonprofits need the for-profit accelerant. And I think that deploying that capital on the for-profit side with the historical support and legacy of the nonprofits is kind of how I envision the most successful collaboration.
Interesting. Anyone? Kieth?
Yeah, so for us at Autism Speaks, like I said earlier, we've been focused on employment for probably about a decade. And our approach on it is, and this was a term that I learned from Virginia Commonwealth when they were doing an evaluation for us. We're really a demand-based employment service to companies, and I think our role there is to help companies, and we offer a suite of free digital training. Anybody who wants to access it, it's called Workforce Inclusion Now. Any company can access it, it's free. And then in a lot of cases, we get involved in more sort of hands-on consulting to go in and look at those, look at those workforce issues, look at those workplace issues, try to help companies address them. That's really our lubricant to try to help the environment along. And I'll just give one anecdote on how we know that it's kind of resonating. Given our role as a large advocacy organization and frankly awareness organization, our PSA last year, with our public service advertisement, is employment-based. My guess is you've probably seen it. It ran actually ran twice during the National Republican Convention, which was a little surprising. It's been during numerous sporting events. It's been in the Wall Street Journal. It's been in the New York Times. It actually is on pretty much every bus stop in the city of Boston. And the pickup of that, where we look from our perspective, the importance is media companies can decide to run whatever they want, right? They use the uptake that we've gotten of this PSA is about it's 100% increase from our old PSA, about 1 billion impressions. And what that's told us is that these media companies looking at it as hopefully smart voices to the corporate world and to the public world is that we got it right. Like what we're all here talking about right now, and have been here all day. The world is opening its eyes to the importance of it. And that one little anecdote I carry around and talk about all the time when we're meeting with companies to talk about this topic.
Great, thank you. Rajesh.
So I would look at it not just as a nonprofit, for-profit kind of structure, but also revenue model, because you've got nonprofits that are that have service revenues, and essentially they're behaving like a business because you've got to deliver value to a paying customer. And that's a big difference because I spend enough time inside nonprofits where if you're driven by philanthropy versus service revenue, you essentially decouple the value chain, right? You have donors giving you money who aren't actually using or benefiting from your service, who usually don't have any insights on what the needs of those beneficiaries or recipients of the service actually are. And so when you decouple it that way, you get really weird dynamics where you're spending most of your time fundraising from donors. And I really don't like, I like sales, I don't like fundraising, because you're not trying to convince the person who's gonna receive the service to pay for the service. It's really tough. The problem, though, is not everyone can pay for the service. There's absolutely a need for nonprofits, and the pressure on nonprofits then to try to build a revenue model when you're serving a segment of the audience that cannot afford to pay for the thing is absurd. And so where these things come together, on the flip side, with for-profits, obviously, if you have an investor, so take Ultranauts, we're now building, part two of our mission is take everything we've learned and get that to other companies, other teams. Essentially, we have some HR tech. Now, if we were an HR tech, we'd be looking at, will people pay for it? And will they use it again? Oh, let's scale this thing. But we're asking the questions, wait, can we convince ourselves that it's actually useful, like changing practices and norms in a way that makes work suck less for more people? And that's a harder question, and there is no way as a startup we could spend money to answer that question. So we're in discussions with some academic partners to get philanthropy in, to do the research, to actually validate this, quote, intervention, because that's how you come together, where there are some things it just makes no sense for us to do, but if you're impact focused, you got to do it.
Right. Very interesting. Okay, before we open up to questions, Duncan, would you like to share anything else?
I would only add one thing, kind of in summary of the great comments we just heard. Let's not get tripped up anymore on the difference between a nonprofit operating at scale and a for-profit company trying to make a difference. I think we can turbocharge each other, right? And you can, there's a reason public-private partnerships work better in a lot of ways than either party trying to do it by themselves. And if we're all really focused on outcomes and results, then let's just keep our eyes on that prize, and it makes decisions, it makes it easier to not live with these boundaries that we've kind of defined these businesses as historically. And I thought some of the comments we just heard really bring that home, right? And if we're all here to try to make a difference, so let's figure out the easiest way to make it. No one has to do it by themselves. If everybody partners, I think we're going to have there's so much capital, be it philanthropic or private capital, focused in this arena right now. We have no one to blame but ourselves if we don't figure out how to do this.
Amen. Okay, questions? I'll just call them out and I'll repeat them. Any questions? I'm sure there's questions. There's got to be questions. Go ahead, Drew.